Burial Ground was yet another entry into the early 80s Italian zombie film. Memorable for its almost unrelenting sleaze and gore and its bizarre subplots, Andrea Bianchi's film is exciting, suspenseful, and ridiculous. I am the Italian Horror Guy, and this is the Italian Horror Guy podcast. So as I indicated last week, I don't know if a high opinion is the most accurate way of describing it, but I've long since had an affinity with this particular film. I think, and it's rare for this kind of reward to happen in a horror film, and that is you grow up with when you're a kid and you're too young to watch horror films, and you look at covers in VHS stores as it was back then, for my generation, you have like a generic idea, I think, of how horror films happen, and it is often whatever horrible monster is on the cover spends a hell of a lot of time on screen. And then when you eventually watch horror films, you realize that that's not true, with some very notable exceptions, one of them being this particular film. Another, I think, is the film Demons 1985 by Lamberto Bava, that I'll definitely do an episode on at some point. But what I think is so great about this film is, if you can call it great, is the unrelenting action, right? And there's almost sort of no point in this film where it isn't, like I suppose none of the runtime is wasted on crap. I mean, perhaps the entire film is crap, but in terms of what it is that you're going to a movie to see, or like a Grindhouse or whatever, to see in 1981, I think it is, or was, you're getting pretty much everything you could possibly want, I think. And the thing is, I don't think you see a movie like this, even really to see a good movie. I think you see a movie like this to have certain expectations met, and give yourself the bloodlust, I suppose, that you're after. And I know that because I was doing a rare thing for me. I was having a read of some reviews of this film, actually, and they're very varying, I would say. And I tend to find on the off occasion I do read reviews of films like this that generally, even opinions that differ extraordinarily, I tend to find I can generally see where they're coming from, and I think that's largely because the reality is, for a horror, like a gore fan, this film is both good and bad. It's bad because in and of itself as a film it's just ridiculous and stupid, but it's good, of course, because it's what you're looking for, right? I don't think anyone's under any misapprehensions about what they're expecting. So to get to the actual crux of the film, I think the start of the film is quite good. There is an interesting mixture of sort of music in this film, and the score that sort of plays over parts of the opening sequence, or a lot of the opening sequence, when the professor is uncovering the secret. He says, "I am the only one who knows a secret," and that's got to be said. There's some unbelievably cheesy and poorly written dialogue in this film that's just like, what were they thinking? But that's okay. And he sort of, he's in his villa, I suppose it is, and he's uncovered a secret, and it's not clear to us what it is, but we know why we're seeing the movie. So obviously it's some kind of waking of the dead secret. So there's just a really good atmosphere, I think, in this opening sequence, right? Like, he wanders, through his yard, I suppose, into some kind of cave or whatever. And, you know, it's absolute amateur filmmaking, right? Like, it's a sort of handheld camera, and it looks like an even cheaper movie than it probably is in this scene. And it's a pretty cheap movie. But I think it kicks us off really, really well. It gets us right into what we're doing. It's so lame and unexplained what exactly he's doing. Like he's hammering away at that brick or whatever, and then obviously the zombies come and get him, and that sucks for him. But like, I think it's a great start, and I think I'll make note as well of the fact that the music in it sounds very much like some of the music from Argento's Phenomena in 1985. It's sort of, I don't know enough about the intricacies and technicalities of certain music, but it almost sounds like a sort of like a synthesized keyboard or something like that. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe I'm showing my ignorance there, but it gives this. I know in Phenomena that music was like very good for this sense of the supernatural, right? And like it very much suited sort of, and it had a very mid-80s feel, right? The music in that film and the film in general. And this is, the music in this is almost like a bit of a prelude to a slight evolution in the Italian horror film, I suppose, as obviously it had to evolve, largely probably because a cycle like the cannibal and the zombie cycle had to die out pretty soon. And as some critics might even have said that this film was partly responsible for it dying out. So, you know, this has been an interesting sort of 3 weeks for mine with looking at this little section of films, because while probably to some extent they're arbitrarily decided, and as I think I mentioned last week, that maybe it was psychologically in my head that these three are a bit of a series, because I actually had my, you know, the zombie collection or whatever it's called. But I think above all else, there's a makeup and there's a style of zombies in these films that is quite unique, I think, to these three films, and I suspect not many others. Some of the I think the facial designs and even like the tattered clothes and stuff, like I mean, it's probably largely because Zombie Holocaust and this film, you know, that the filmmakers were very aware of the success of zombie flesh eaters, and they were largely probably imitating that. But nonetheless, I think that is, you know, they can't complain, because they you know, were trying to rip off, at least from a marketing perspective, Dawn of the Dead in order to get popular for that. So that's the nature of exploitation film, and that's the nature of this particular film. But I think that, yeah, some of the designs of the zombies are really cool in this film, and I think even, like, you know, some of it is very, like, they look like masks, right, a lot of the time. But I think where the film gets away with it a little bit in that is that they're very well designed masks, right? And I think that, you know, the world of the zombie film, probably with George Romero, had gone through the phase of these are reanimated dead people, and in this film, these are reanimated, you know, rotting corpses. And I think it's a distinction. I think as well, I wonder to some extent if, you know, when you consider the budget and probably inability to get any kind of decent extras, that it's probably easier to act out the zombie stuff when you're very slow moving, I suppose. So that was also a feature of these three films when it comes to the zombie side of it. But I think that I think overall, you know, you grab a DVD or a VHS back in the day, and go to the movies, and, you know, you're paying to see zombies, And this is like, it's an 85-minute film. It's about 70 minutes of zombies, right? And 15 minutes of sex. So, you know, that's what you want, right? So, about literally, I think the only moment, like basically the only moments of this film where you wouldn't look at it in, like, without any other context, but also knowledge of Italian horror films and zombie films. The only time in this film that you wouldn't instantly recognize it as a stupid, sleazy B movie from the late 70s or early 80s is the opening credits scene where the cars are driving and the credits are rolled. That's it. So we have the initial scene with the professor getting eaten, although, you know, he comes back later, but fairly intact as a zombie. And so in this opening sequence, they're just driving, and this is a sort of jazzy score, which is bizarre, but also, you know, I think the music cues for the most part in this film are quite effective, because it's like, this is the most upbeat piece of music in the film by a distance, and it's also really the only time that it's logical to have an upbeat score, because you know, the rest of the film is fairly terrifying for the characters. So as I say, there's very little time before we get into the zombies, and like, even for the sleazy B movie horror film, the amount of like sexual stuff that's going on in these initial parts of the movie is like, it's so hilariously gratuitous and just completely lacking in context. So look, I assume that at some point, it's probably not the safest assumption, but I will anyway, that the film sort of explains exactly what the hell this sojourn to this villa is. Like, I know that they were invited by the professor, but what did the weekend entail? Was it like he found this wonderful secret and he had to tell them and they had to come to the villa? I don't really get it. But it's three couples and one with their adolescent 25-year-old son. That it's amazing to think that just about the only piece of information this film gives us about any characters that goes anything beyond like their arbitrary like positions, like the professor, or I don't actually really know what the hell any of the couples are. I guess they're just people with money is my is what I gather. The only piece of information beyond those arbitrary things about the characters is these bizarre incestuous desires that it's Michael, I think, has for his mum. It's so odd because like it's not contextual in any way in the film, because there's literally nothing else going on in the film that can be linked to it. It's just, there are people getting eaten by zombies, and one of the people has sexual desires for his mum. And that's sort of it. Like, none of the other characters have anything of note. So anyway, there's a sequence for a very short period of time. They go in and there's like a couple of like butler servant people, one man, one woman, and they're both very bad actors. But that, you know, that's the charm of the film, obviously. And then, see, the film doesn't even really establish any kind of like settling in. Like, I assume it's some kind of weekend getaway, and they're there, and like they walk inside for a scene that's probably no longer than 30 seconds, and then the characters sort of disperse into their couples in their own rooms and start having sex with each other. And, you know, it's really lame early 80s B-movie sex as well. So, it's so odd how, you know, as I say, they don't try to develop anything about the characters except for this child, in inverted commas. And I was assured on the very little research I did on Wikipedia that the reason he was played by this man that I think had some kind of sort of growth impairment, who looks quite humorously a bit like Dario Argento, but I'll just leave that. That he was cast in the role because of, you know, his character is 14 years old, and obviously they couldn't shoot this with an actual 14-year-old. But it's sort of like a humorous solution to the problem is to get what is clearly a fully grown man with a growth defect to play a 14-year-old, when surely they could have just got like a 19-year-old to play the 14-year-old, and that would have been possible. But and then the other question, the question with that is like, well, why not just not do this at all? Like, why not give one of the other nonsense characters some kind of backstory or something? But anyway, so it cuts to the three different couples having sex, and you know, there's the scene where Michael's mother, well, I guess they're about to, when the mother goes in to check on Michael and he's asleep, and then when she shuts the door, he sort of springs up and his eyes are all wide, like, and this is sort of played as like, well, with some kind of horror, but like, what are we, like, is the insinuation that the horror, so the two strands of horror in this film are, you know, zombies killing you, and that Michael's dad has sex with his mum and he's horrified by that. What is this? So he looks up and there's some kind of like generic horror music cue, and that's funny. And then it cuts to, I think it's James and Leslie. I think are the James is the one with that really bizarre sort of porno mustache, and he's all, well, Leslie's dressed provocatively and she's dancing around, and then so now the music's evolved from the jazzy stuff to the sort of slow, sleazy, almost softcore porn type music, and she's like, she's dancing around, and James is like, she asks him if he likes it, and he's like, you look just like a little whore, but I like that look on you. And it's like the delivery of the line. See, this is one of the things that often gets me about the dubbing in these films, right? That you sort of, and like, there doesn't really seem to be that much of a range of different actors, and my assumption is that these actors were doing voice actors, that is, that these voice actors weren't just horror film. Like, I haven't done much research into that, but I assume that they're doing a lot of like different films. So I think a lot of the time, it feels to me at least, especially in films like this, that they just don't like put any effort in. Like, it's so unconvincing. Oh, you look just like a little whore, but I like that look on you. Like, well, it's such a bizarre tone to say that in. And see, this is one of the charms, right? What I think that films like this, like the actual visuals and everything that's going on, is already sleazy and cheesy to a point of like that it can't be redeemed. So you might as well have the dialogue delivered in a totally cheesy and stupid way anyway, because it's no different to the nature of the film that we've already got. So, like, that's fine. Trying to make it seem serious, even if they were trying to make it seem serious, but it would never work, so you might as well just have it completely unserious. So, yeah, there's a few different... And these sex scenes have the tone of like a soft-core porn film. Because, there's a little bit of nudity, but like it's also the sort of vibe, right? And then, so it's interesting because the film spends... Like, my impression if you're one of the actors in this film is, if you were given the information about it, it would be you're one of the people. You go to a villa and with some friends, and you and your friends get chased and eaten by zombies over the course of a day or two. And it's like the villa itself is never really fleshed out. And I mean, that's not a massive deal, but just like Zombie Holocaust, like they're sort of 85-minute films, and I feel like the film could really do with 5 extra minutes at the start, 5 or 10 minutes, where we just have a little bit of background that isn't just the characters having sex, because all that happens in the villa before they've discovered the zombies is they walk in, they have sex, and then there's like this one very brief scene at breakfast the next day. And that's like, again, 30 seconds or so. And yeah, as I say, I do appreciate the fact that, there's so much zombie action in this film, and that the film's sort of unapologetic in the fact that that's what it's trying to do and that's what it's doing. But you can have just as much of that if you wait an extra 5 or 10 minutes before sort of revealing it, right? So, it's interesting that of all the things that I'm being critical of in the film, that is what I'm focusing on. Because there's certainly a lot more that I could do than that. So the next day, they are at breakfast, and there's some more cheesy dialogue, and they talk about that it's sunny outside and that it's nice. So they go and... the younger couple, which I think is Mark and whoever, I'll just call them the younger couple, because the thing about these movies, and I think everyone will appreciate that, the characters are basically interchangeable and irrelevant. And I must even admit, when I was watching it again, and I've watched it a number of times before, because I really like it, that when it comes to the end, near the end, when they discover that Leslie has eaten Michael, even their names are really generic, that I couldn't remember if Leslie was the one that he was with, and then I deduced it because of course he's not Michael's dad, so, and Michael's not Leslie's son, so that was how I worked it out. But I mean, maybe that's me not following it properly, or I think it's partly that, but it's also the fact that the nature of these films makes the characters very interchangeable, and because you just don't care about any of them, right? Like I don't think there's a character in this film that is definitively the main one. If it is, it's maybe James, but then by the end, like the fact that he sort of dies before the others, and you're left after the mother has a nipple bitten off, but we'll get to that. That's sort of the young couple that are left. And I sort of think, like, are these the main two? Were these really the two that were going to survive the longest? Apparently, but that's the thing. Like, no characters are designed to like stand out from any of the others, because you just want them running around and in fear. So that's fine. I think that the next. I think once the film kicks into gear, that it becomes really good. And it's interesting because, as in really fun, I should say, as humorous as the sequence of sort of sex scenes, if you want to call them that, is, it's just all very silly. So I was obviously critical of probably both the previous two films, that the sex or the nudity that's written in is like, it's so out of context from everything else in the film that it was like they were meeting their sort of audience expectations, right? That part of it is that you expect to see a bit of nudity or sex. Whereas in this film, it's definitely more written in by virtue of the fact that all these characters are couples, but also I guess the film understands that as it goes on, there's not going to be a lot of opportunities for it once the zombies come out, because, you know, they are quite unrelenting. The film is unrelenting once the zombies start, so they get so much of the sex out of the way. But because the scenes are just so incredibly lame, it's, you know, it's like I don't really want to deal with this, let's get to the zombies. So, they the couples will sort of disperse and go to various places. There's James with Leslie. They're sort of, what are they doing? They're having a bit of a chat. I feel like they make out a little bit, and then there's the young couple, and the male's taking these really hilarious pictures of the lady, like just in these ridiculous poses. And she's a particularly bad actress, and the dubbing on her throughout the film doesn't reflect her in a very positive light at all. But we accept that. And I think quite clearly the most redundant character in this film is the dad, right? Of, like, obviously Leslie's, is it Leslie, or whoever, we'll call her the mother, whoever the mother's, her husband, whoever he is, he's just totally redundant. So they're off in some kind of building where there's statues and shit. So this sequence, I think, sort of builds suspense. And I just want to be clear, the suspense is never like scary in that like you're expecting a jump scare or like there's much uncertainty. But I think this particular scene is actually maybe even slightly accidentally effective, in the sense that like we're watching a few scenes of like hands moving in the ground, or point of view shots that, like, one of them is James's wife, and that's a bit of a surprise that it's not actually a zombie yet. But the suspense is almost like, in this scene, is almost like, or sequence I should say, like the film is almost keeping us in suspense, as if, are we really going to bring all the zombies out right now? Because it's only like 20 minutes into the film, and they're very much sort of on the grounds here everywhere, right? So once, like, logistically, you sort of feel like once they come out, they're going to be there for the remainder of the film. But that is obviously what the film's doing, which I think is really cool, and sort of it reveals the motivations of the film, that we're all about making gore and zombies and not a hell of a lot else, and sex to sort of fulfill a requirement. So there is the young couple are sort of not exactly having sex, but making out, and then I'm pretty sure James is with his wife, and then I can't remember the exact order of events in terms of which one gets revealed first, but the sequence in the building where the dad eventually dies is, to be honest, I think it's a very good sequence. And the nature of the zombies in this film is that they're slow and that they're extremely slow, right? Well, actually, they're also very smart, but we'll get to that. There's almost a sense like they're toying with people, right? And like they come into that building and, Michael and his mum are absolutely pathetic, and then their dad, who has a bit of a Gene Wilder sort of vibe, he tries to be the hero, but he just keeps shooting the zombies in the chest and stuff, and then eventually they get him. So that's fine, and then we're revealed, the first of quite a few of these scenes where a character dies, and then the zombies just sort of steadily devour them, right? Like they're just reaching in and they're just pulling out their vital organs and stuff. They're just doing it, and then there's that weird sort of synthy music happening while it's happening, and it's all very zombie film, and it's all very, very glorious. And so eventually, I think it's a bit after that. It's worth mentioning again for the redundancy of the film, I don't think any of the characters are ever, as in redundancy of the dad, I don't think any of the characters know for certain that he's actually died until the very end when he comes out as a reanimated zombie, which is sort of hilarious. Like the son and the mum don't even seem to care particularly. Definitely the son doesn't. I mean, it's good because he's out of the way now, so he doesn't have a challenge to her or whatever. The scene again, after the dad's died, and then there's those couple of zombies that are there that they set on fire. Now, I'm pretty sure that they're actual stunt people being set on fire. And it's like, that's an extraordinary level of commitment to for a film like this. Like, how much did they actually get paid, right? Probably not a hell of a lot. As a stuntman on Burial Ground in 1981. But that is quite effective, but it doesn't seem worth it because the shots aren't very long. Like, some of the shots actually focus more on the mother's reaction. And it's worth mentioning, this is some pretty good cinematography, right, with the fire sort of reflecting in her skin and her eyes and stuff. Like, that's really cool. I think that looks cool. And then throughout the next few minutes there, there's the young couple that are fighting off zombies, and the stupid girl gets caught in a bear trap or whatever. And, it's an interesting one because I wonder if that was just on the grounds or if that was like something the zombies set up. It's probably barely worth thinking about. And it's just an excruciatingly long sequence getting her out, and then eventually James and his wife, finding them and helping them. And, like, I think I made mention of this last week for Zombie Holocaust as well, that there are certain moments in these films that are so drawn out that you're like, how short was the script? Because so many of the gory scenes and the suspense scenes, if you want to call them that, are like just so ponderous and so unnecessarily long. And then you look at the end and it's gone 85 minutes. And you're like, well, did they have any script at all? Or when they were shooting it, were they like, geez, we really need to get some more out of this? But, so there's a number of scenes of the man from the young couple just having like lengthy fights with the zombies, and he's so bad at it, right? He doesn't die, but obviously he's about to. He's about to get his head sawed in at the end of the film, which is like great. We're sick of him, but we don't get to see it, unfortunately. But like, there's just so much like time padding, and at times it's frustrating, I think, but at other times it's like it's rewarding because you get some gore out of it. So whilst I like the sequence overall in these the daytime, the let's go out and enjoy the sunshine section or portion of the film. There's not much of a gore payoff in it, so it's just sort of building up the power of the zombies, I suppose. But they're all sort of coming out of the ground and collecting together slowly. But I guess it sort of makes sense in that they're sort of one at a time, and they're just the corpses from however long they've been in the ground, apparently just lying right under the grass, just like happens in zombie flesh eaters. But let's not be too critical of that. But eventually they sort of chase them all back into the house, and there's probably a part of me that thinks maybe it would have actually been just slightly better. Again, maybe for a bit of length, or just, I wonder if at some point the film just needed to take a breath, and because, don't get me wrong, the speed of the zombies very much feeds into the feel of the film, or maybe not just feeds in, but is similar to the feel of the film in that it's slow moving, and it's unfolding. It's not sort of energetic. So it doesn't feel at any given moment like the stakes are higher, say, than in another moment. But there's also never a point once the zombies are there that they can ever just sort of take a collective breath. And I think perhaps the film needs it. The time that they would be taking that breath, I think, is when they all get back inside, and then the butler servant people are there. That feels like the moment that the film's about to take a breath, but it clearly isn't, because of what happens to the girl. Now, I personally think this is a sensational scene. This is a great horror scene, because as much as the film is clearly gory, you know what you're in for, there's something extraordinarily torturous about this scene. And so I'll describe it. She's wandering around, and just by the way, as I say this, it's meant to, this is the point of the film that the characters would take stock. That they're not going to, because of the way when the woman is walking around the villa by herself, this sort of fairly close-up shot of her face with the candle, and you're the film's telling us, no, let's keep panicking, right? It's not going to get any easier. So she panics, and again, this is actually quite effective, right? This whole scene's really effective, I think. She looks around, and there's a curtain that is blowing. She notices that, and she's like, oh no, there's obviously some kind of window open. So then she notices that the window's open. And what I like about this scene is that, and you don't necessarily expect this in B movies, and certainly not in this particular B movie, is it gives you the credit of being let's actually explain the logistics of this without, as in, let's not pretend that this girl isn't being cautious, right? Let's not just have her try to close the window having not checked. She does check, and she thinks all is clear. But see, this is where the smart zombies come in, right? They're hiding behind the bushes. And apparently they're very accurate throws. So one of the zombies throws some kind of a massive nail perfectly into her hand, which nails her hand to the wall. And then the what's that weapon that the death carries? Is it a scythe or something? What is it? Anyway, they've got one of those things, one of the death things. And a scythe, I think, that appears to be right. We'll call it that anyway. And it's in this scene, there's no reason for the zombies to take so damn long to cut her head off, but they really take ages to lift it above her head. and just slowly cut through her neck. And I think it's, really effective the way she's screaming, and then she stops screaming, obviously, when it gets to a certain point. And like, just the whole thing is, it's gore, it's torture. It's just like, it's a classic horror film scene, right? Like, it's a really, really excellent scene. And it's also, just because of the torturousness of it, it's like, it's borderline disturbing, I would say. So her head falls off and they grab it and eat it and stuff. And then, to be honest, I think this whole sort of 5-minute or so sequence is actually pretty damn good. Like, in all seriousness, James then wanders around to try to find her, and we get similar sort of close-ups of his face looking terrified. And it's interesting how they just keep going off by themselves. Like, there's no need to go off by themselves. But he sees her leaning at the window and doesn't realise, obviously, that she's dead, and he tries to get her attention. But I think the realisation when he sees that she's not got a head anymore, and sort of has that thought, like, well, it's interesting, because does he have a thought like, let's feed the zombies so they lose interest? Or is it like, I'm going to have to throw her out so I can close the window? Either way, he overturns her. And look, I just think this whole sequence, for a film that at times doesn't sort of bother explaining things that well, and doesn't, perhaps sometimes doesn't make the most of its potentially gory scenes, and where the scenes that, they just go too long. That this one is a lengthy sequence, but it earns the right, I think, by the fact that it rewards us with an extremely horrific scene. So he overturns her, she is grabbed by the zombies, and even that's so creepy as well, right? Like, they have to pull her down and break her hand through the nail. The whole thing's just awful. And then yeah, it's disgusting. It's another one of the scenes where they just opening up as a body that's lying in the ground, right? Or on the ground, and they're just having their way with it. And there's all kinds of organs and intestines and stuff going all over the place. So it's just a great scene, I think. And then I guess the rest of the movie at this point is like just sort of moving people around and coming up with silly ideas within the characters, and like how, basically how do we continue this to be interesting, I suppose. So eventually they eventually return, right, to the theme of Michael with his mother. In fact, I'll acknowledge it is Leslie. That's what James's wife is, Leslie, and she is at one point walking beyond a window, and a zombie sort of grabs her and kills her. And that's an okay scene. That feels like it was almost trying to commit to being an ode to, or a rip-off of, the zombie flesh eater scene with the eye and the splinter, but we don't quite get to that point. But it's setting up what they're going to do. So we eventually return to the Michael and his mother thing, and like he decides to, I don't know, make his move now that Dad's dead. he's upset and he's scared, and they're sitting down, and he sort of kisses her cheek about 5 too many times, and then, that whole thing is uncomfortable. So I'm not actually going to go into too much detail on it, but put it this way, he does seem to be trying to sleep with her. So that's right. I think this next sequence is pretty good. So she slaps him. Now that's like this sequence, I couldn't care less about it. It's quite ridiculous. But after that, the shots of like Michael sort of prances away because he's upset. He can't believe that his mother won't sleep with him, and he's sort of wandering around the villa by himself. He's very aware that there's like zombies walking around and stuff, so he should probably keep his wits about him. But then he comes across Leslie, who's dead, but obviously he doesn't realise that she's dead. And I think the POV shots from Leslie to him are really, really good. Like, it's quite convincing. Well, I don't know about convincing, but like his eyes are all wide, and he's a weird looking dude anyway. And then obviously we don't see the death, but I think that's probably the effective thing about it, right? When his mother comes in and finds him, and she's all, well, he's dead, right? And Leslie's eating him. I think that actress plays the zombie really well. I mean, it's probably not that difficult. Like, she's just sitting there with wide eyes, and I don't know if it's an arm, or maybe it's Michael's arm. I don't know. And he's dead, and she's eating his arm. We'll say it's his arm, and she's got blood all over her face, and it's totally disgusting. And the mother's upset, and then she's screaming, "You killed him! You killed my son!" And then she just sort of bashes Leslie to death. And so the thing about it is, I don't know what it is that the film's trying to do here, because it hasn't made any attempt at plot. There's no way to actually care about any of the characters, because the film doesn't require us to care about any of the characters, as far as I can tell. And if the only plot that they sort of go into beyond basic factors about these characters is this weird incest storyline, and we don't have any interest in that happening, presumably. So it's like, well, he's very unlikable. And then it's like, well, the mother is obviously upset that her son's dead, but, Leslie's a zombie, and the mother doesn't have any knowledge of that. But it's sort of humorous if you think about it, like, because she's sort of walked in there and thinks that Leslie is not a zombie, but he's just eating her son. Like, Leslie, who is presumably her friend, has just thought, amongst all the commotion, I might just eat him. Why not? Let's just kill him and eat his arm. So she bashes her head on like a toilet or a bathtub or something, and then she's dead. And then James comes in, and he's sad because his wife's now dead, but he doesn't really acknowledge, like, he's just sad. He doesn't go and like hug her or anything. And then they move on. So what are we down to? We're down to James, the mother, and the young couple. And we're then at some point in all this, in fact, I think just before it, but it doesn't really matter, the male in the young couple has like one of the dumbest moments, I think. He's like, we should let them in. Now, in theory, I'm not sure if this is a bad idea, because I think the idea is like, let them in, we hide, then we escape, assuming that they're all in. So that in and of itself is fine. But he's also like, maybe they want something in the house, not us. And it's like, you've witnessed them eating you. Like, They were introduced to the movie by attacking him and his girlfriend, and he's like, maybe they're not interested in us. Like, what are they interested in, dickhead? It's so funny because it's like in one way he's onto something, like because they do hide in that little door closet thing, whatever it is, and wait about 1 second after the zombies have passed to sneak out. But like it sort of works because I think they get out of there. Anyway, so we're down to just the 4 of them. Hang on, just let me consult the the plot I've got here in front of me so I can get back on track. I know at some point within all this sequence there's a very lengthy scene of like the blonde girl, the girlfriend, sort of fighting off a zombie, excruciatingly slowly. But to be honest, it's just a bit too long and a bit unnecessary, so I won't dwell on that. So they do leave, the 4 of them leave, and of course I didn't mention the male butler who's still alive, but I mean, how redundant is he? The professor comes out of a room, and one thing that's really never made clear in this movie is how the dead characters keep coming back to where everyone else is, but they always seem intact. Like, so the professor comes out of some kind of a room, but it's as if he had been in the room the whole time, but we see him get eaten in a cave at the start of the movie, so there's no reason why he would be back in the house any more than a random zombie would be. But anyway, he looks pretty good with his dark eyes, and the stupid butler's like, oh, we thought you were dead, and then he realizes too late, so he bites into the butler's neck, and it's like, well, put him out of his misery, and misery of just being a total idiot, not that he was necessarily going to die, just what's the point in living if you're that stupid? So he's gone, and none of the characters really seem to care about that. And then we move into the final act, if you want to call it that. The 4 of them escape, and they're running around, and they see like a monk going up to a monastery, right? And this is probably the coolest concept in the film. Not necessarily the blatant trickery of it, because I think we all know that we're not seeing any other characters that aren't zombies in this film, right? It doesn't really feel like it. But they decide to follow the monk into the monastery. And I don't know. I don't really think that it's like the film trying to have some kind of go at religion. I think it's more just like, once you've got zombies impersonating monks, it's like these are smart people, right? But like, if you think about the implication that the zombie has dressed up this way, maybe in order to, because he knows that the living humans are in this situation going to seek them out. Now I know you might say, oh, but maybe they were already monks, maybe these were reborn monks, but like, think a little bit deeper about it. Their robes and stuff are actually newer. Like, they look quite new compared to the other ones. And also, a number of the zombies we see once they enter are zombies that we've seen clearly not dressed as monks early in the film. So I think the insinuation is that about 10 zombies decided to dress up as monks because they thought that they could trick the humans by doing it, and they could. So these are the smartest zombies we've ever seen, right? There's that scene, I think a little earlier, when they're all lining up and they're collecting their weapons. Obviously, there's the scene with the nail and the scythe, and I'm all for it, right? So the advantage that the humans have is that the zombies are slow, and the young male partner guy he points that out when he's having his genius thought about letting them into the house. He says, we can fight them off. They're all so slow. And when moments like this happen in zombie movies, it's almost like it feels like the movie is giving us a bit of a wink. Like, don't worry, guys. We're aware that it looks stupid that the characters can't outrun them or whatever. But I guess to an extent, this movie justifies that by the sheer intelligence of them. And also, I think the sense that they can't actually escape. Because they mention earlier in the film, I think during the sunlight, that they need to get to the car so they can drive away. And when they get back to the house or the villa, then the zombies aren't walking at them, but they're standing at the cars. And I don't know if the film is trying to explain blatantly to us that the zombies know not to let them into the cars because that's how they'll keep them there. But whether it is or it isn't the case, there's gates around, there's a lot of gates and doors in this film, right? It's quite an interesting aspect of it. And I think regardless of how slow the zombies are, it's effective because it's never shown how many of them are. And the film really, really does succeed, I think, in the impression that there's actually nowhere for them to go, right? I think the only time that it probably loses credibility in that sense is when after they leave the monastery, that they're like, they see that building and they run into that. And it's like, why not just keep running? You've already said you can outrun them. You're in open space. And it's quite open space, so they'll be able to see zombies, right? But anyway, I'll get back to the monastery. So James follows the monk into a room, and the moment when he realizes, I think it's damn cool anyway. You know, they're doing their little thing. I don't know. I won't go in. I don't really know what it is, but they're all leaning down on the table, some kind of prayer, I suppose. And it already looks freaky. I think this is one of the effective things, at least, especially within the context of the film that we know we're watching. These suddenly clean-looking robes in this very old-looking monastery, right? Like, it doesn't look like it's been sort of maintained. Like, there's chips off the paint in the wall and stuff. And they've all got their heads down. And I think instinctively the audience knows full well what's about to happen. But the revelation is so good. And it's as if, you know, and it sort of zooms in on all their faces, and it's as if the zombies are sort of thinking like, yeah, we got you, right? And now you're going to die. So it's interesting because as the film goes on, I think James becomes a worthwhile character, or the only nearly worthwhile character in the whole film. So he dies and they eat him, obviously, and then he gets up, and I think the way he gets up is pretty, I don't know, there's blood all over his face. I just think he's done up really well as a zombie, as a reanimated person. So the other three see all this, they see the sort of result, and then they run away. They leave the monastery, and as I said, they should just run away, but they don't. So they go into, what do they call it, some kind of arts or some kind of craft workshop or something. What the fuck are you doing in there? So they put a big thing in front of the door, and they decide to go upstairs, and slowly the door opens, and a zombie comes out, and this fucking guy, like, my God, is it called Mark? I think he's Mark, the male from the young couple, and he's just taking forever to fight this zombie. He's got some kind of, like, I thought it was some kind of ceramic object, but it almost feels like cardboard the way he's whacking the zombie with it. He's sort of whacking the zombie's shoulder. It's like, what are you doing? And then eventually he manages to, like, throw the zombie off the side of this little railing, which is whatever, I suppose. And then Michael walks through. And like, what the fuck is this scene? So the stupid mother, oh, Michael, you came back to me. And then like, oh. He looks at her, she hugs him. He eyes up off her breast and she lets him suckle. And I mean, this requires no analysis. Anyone who's seen this film doesn't need me to talk about this scene. So I won't go into too much detail. But what I will note is, so the couple are looking at this unfold. So she's at the top of the stairs and they're sort of on the stairs, right? And the male's hugging the female, and they have this expression at first, and especially the guy, this look of like fearful uncertainty, shall we say? And they have that when Michael walks through the door, and when the mother's embracing him. Now, the whole thing is like they know that he's dead, but I guess there's a degree of hope that like it's different or something, because he hasn't rushed straight at her and bitten her, and you know, I guess he's still got his love for his mother feelings that they're still confused in his zombie brain somewhere. But so I think when he starts suckling, eventually the guy's like, don't let him, he's a zombie. Or maybe it's even before that, stop it, he's a zombie. But like, as the suckling is happening, the look on the faces of the couples is still the same. And it's sort of funny because the look that they're giving is still, I guess, the look that you would give in that situation. But it's sort of funny because it doesn't change from when zombie Michael walks through to when zombie Michael's suckling on a nipple. It's just sort of like, I'm not sure about this. Whereas their face should almost have evolved to that, like almost to have forgotten the fact that they're probably all about to die in the next couple of minutes, to what the fuck are we looking at? Why is this mother letting her 14-year-old 25-year-old zombie son suckle on her nipple? So the inevitable happens and he just bites it off, which is very, very uncomfortable to watch, I think it'd be fair to say. And, you know, she dies and then the zombies come in. And I will actually acknowledge, I actually think this sequence now is very effective because within it, so it's just a young couple left, and as I say, I don't know why the hell they're the two that get to survive the longest. But we've just seen Michael return. Within it, we see the dad come through. We see James come back with his cool, now zombie sort of blood face. And it's like, it's done in a pretty... we also see the mother lying on the ground dead. And this whole sequence is done quite well because it doesn't feel like... It doesn't feel exactly like they're going, oh, look, here are all the dead people from earlier in the film. I mean, that is sort of what they're doing, but it's only part of what they're doing. And it sort of feels like they earn the right a little bit because it's not exactly explained where they are in relation to everything else or why Michael was there. But once Michael is there, it makes sense that so are the other characters that have been killed throughout the course of the film. And then, you know, they hold down the guy like they're gonna put the saw through his head, and then there's a lot of hands that are reaching for the girl, and they stop reaching as the credits are about to roll for an effective shot. And that's it. So I think one thing that needs to be acknowledged, right? And I really, really like this aspect of the film. It was the thing that stuck with me the first time I watched it. Everyone dies. Like all of the characters. I don't think there's a character in this film that doesn't die. Now, obviously, with the exception of the last two, because we don't see them die, but we know they're going to. I'm just trying to rack my brain. I don't even think there are extras in the film that don't die. Because the movie's obviously such a small budget and it's so contained that we only see the professor at the start, and then I think there's 10 characters in the film. There's the professor, there's the 2 people that work at the villa, and then there's the 7 guests. And every single one of them die, and then that's it. And it's like, I respect that. I respect the hell out of that. They've got this self-contained movie, and there's always a survivor. And maybe this is the one part of the film that is good in sort of justifying why the characters are so drab. And I mean, there are worse characters, right? There are a worse set of characters in films from this era, I think, like even more interchangeable and boring. Because as I've indicated, I reckon Billy and James is sort of cool, but like by not making any characters really stand out from each other, the characters for the whole film just feel like stupid, zombie/murder fodder in a generic horror film. And I think it's deliberately designed that way, in a sense. And it's like, while you're watching, like, well, which of these characters is going to be the lucky one, or 2 or 3 or 4 to survive? And the answer is no candidates ever emerge. And they never really seem to have a chance, right? I mean, they should post and even before the monastery, but even then, right? There's nothing in the film ever feels like someone's about to escape. So I think it deserves that level of credit. So, if it's can be taken away from the film, or sorry, if it's a mark against the film, right, that the characters are so dead and boring, then I think it's a check for the film and in favour of it that everyone dies, because most horror films just don't do that. I can't think of too many examples where that's the case, and I'll give it full credit for that. And I'll wrap up the discussion there and just say, I think it's a great film. It's terrible and it's stupid, but it's great. It's enjoyable and it's unrelenting, and it was an absolute pleasure to revisit it and talk about it. So beyond this, moving into a Fulci phase, 3 films in a row. Perversion Story next week, then Lizard in a Woman's Skin, and then my all-time favourite movie, Don't Torture a Duckling, the week after. I think I'm going to shift, to Sunday releases of this show. I think I've got, as I say, a number of different podcasts that I'm trying to sort of push all towards the weekend, so I can either record during the weekend, release them on the weekends, or just record them on the weekends. I recorded yesterday an episode of the Horror Film Science podcast with my brother about Cannibal Holocaust, which you guys should definitely check out. That was a really, really fun discussion. And yeah, you should tune in next week for my episode of the 1969 Lucio Fulci film Perversion Story. That should be great fun, as it was great fun discussing Burial Ground. Thanks very much, guys. Join me next week.